Hi everybody, welcome to a new segment by ZeoFit. This is going to be called Ruminations from the rower. Now it's important to note in this circumstance that the rower is not, I don't consider myself to be the rower. Anybody who's actually on Cal Crew is probably going to see right away that I am not a rower. However, this is a rower. So the rower here is this Concept 2 machine that I'm on, not necessarily me, although I am doing my best impression of a rower right now. For those of you who don't know, Cal's got a great crew team, so go Bears. But that's not why we're here. What I want to ruminate about while I'm on this rower is something that I think is very important, especially important today with what's going on right now. Let me note that I am aware that I've been overworking you. And that's part of the reason for this segment, to give you a break from all of the get some that I throw you on an almost daily basis. You know, the workouts are very intense, and if you are doing them with intensity, then they are going to have a profound effect on your body and mind. As if there wasn't already enough to tax your mind, especially with the quarantine and the uncertainty that's derived from it, as well as the widely publicized racial tensions that are currently and have been for a long time going on in this country. There's a lot out there to overwhelm you, increase your anxiety, and make it difficult for you to recover. It's really recovery, this is an obvious statement, but recovery is extremely important to your body when you're training. It's also important for your mind, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But if your anxiety levels are getting high, you're not able to relax yourself, although we do have some mental recovery and physical recovery things available for you, especially the breathing cadences, progressive muscle relaxation, and race visualization that you can check out up there, right? But if you're getting anxious, if you're getting stressed, your body's going to be producing a lot of cortisol, stress hormones. That's going to affect your ability to sleep. It's going to interrupt your body's ability to produce anabolic hormones, the growth hormones that repair and make you stronger, and that is not even taking into account what actually happens to your brain while you're sleeping. There's a whole nother thing there. But basically, you got to be able to recover if you want to get strong. And if you're broken down and you got to take some time, I understand that. And that's why we're having this today. So let's talk a little about what I want to talk about today, which is empathy. Now, you can think of empathy as being the sleep that's required to recover from social strain, social damage. When a person is going through trauma, they need empathy from their community in order to be able to process their own feelings and recover. And as we know, you need to recover to be able to become stronger. And that's where empathy really comes in. Empathy, when used correctly, like sleep, it can heal an individual. It can heal a society. But now empathy, just like all the physical training that you do, empathy is a skill. And just like any other skill, it needs to be practiced. And if you want to be able to practice empathy, you got to understand what it is. You got to understand how to get there. Okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about this now. I have 4 concepts that I've thought about that I felt were very important. And we're going to get into those. There's probably going to be a little bit of overlap between them, and that's fine. So the first thing I want to talk about is when you are trying to empathize with somebody, think about what empathy is, by the way. It has to do with feeling somebody else's emotions. It starts EM, empathy. Same EM, emotion. Empathy is about your emotions. It's about feeling another person's emotions without having to be that person and without having to experience what they've gone through. So the first step here is a lot of people shoot themselves in the foot before they even give themselves a chance to practice empathy. And that thing is something that's really been ingrained into us as a society. That quality is defensiveness. Defensiveness comes from the idea that we have to defend what we believe in, and in doing so, try to convince other people that our way is the right way. This runs contrary to healing, both personal and societal healing. When you're trying to be empathetic, you're not trying to convince somebody that their feelings are not valid. That doesn't work. That just causes somebody to push back, polarize, and dig their heels in. So the first thing you gotta do is scuttle that knee-jerk reaction that you have to be defensive. This can be very difficult, I know that. Realize that this exercise is not about defending your perspective, but rather about validating and acknowledging another person's perspective. And here's the kicker, right? In order to do this, it is not necessary that you agree with them at all. You can empathize without agreeing, even in the slightest. That should not, if you're good at it, that should not impede your ability to empathize, okay? Second thing, don't try to rationalize a person's struggle or trauma. And I'm going to give you an idea of what those types of phrases sound like, and we'll tell you what you should do, right? So what you don't want to do, you don't want to use words that try to rationalize by saying things like, oh, well, at least this didn't happen, or, wow, you should be grateful that you still have something. Words like should, words like at least, a phrase like at least, that's something you should be aware of if you find yourself saying something like that, even though your intentions might be great. But if you start off a sentence like that with you should, at least, it could have been so much worse, something like that, you're going to be getting in your own way in trying to empathize with this person and ultimately affect their healing. Remember, we're not talking about being rational. Emotions, by nature, are irrational. And as we discussed previously, EM, empathy, EM, emotions, they are related to the same thing, okay? So don't even try to rationalize them. Your emotions, you should recognize them as being what they are. It's just another sense. It's your emotional sense. It's a tool that allows you to interact with the world outside of you and your own psychic world within you. But as any other sense, you got to be able to analyze, understand it, and recognize that your emotions are not rational and they should not always be trusted. Okay? That takes practice. Hey, just like any skill, that takes practice. Okay? So, to use a validating statement, this would be the third tenet, to use a validating statement, that's something that creates support. Okay, so instead of saying, at least, you should, it could, things like that, you say, wow, that sounds really difficult. Recognize their pain, recognize their emotions without judging or trying to, explain why they should feel one way or the other, because the way that they feel is the way that they feel. And you're there to help them sort through these things on their own, not tell them how to feel, right? And a big part of that is understanding that you don't understand. Even if you've been through something similar, and it can be helpful to, point out that you have been through something similar so that a person can maybe feel a little closer to you because of a shared experience, but recognize that the similarities end there. You are not that person. You do not have their relationships. Your psyche, although similar, is different than theirs. And understanding that you don't understand their perspective, where they're coming from, is really important for creating the space for that person to explain how they feel. to explain their perspective and experience without judgment. And that space allows for them to start working through their grief, their trauma, their struggles on their own terms, right? Letting yourself, or letting them know that you're there, that you're available, that you won't judge, that you can listen. This is what allows a person to create the space, create the type of relaxed kind of mental mindset that they need to be able to rationally work through their trauma, and knowing that they have a safety net in you to be able to do that is a lot of times all that they need, okay? Understand that empathy and communication are two cornerstones of humanity that have shaped our experience as a species. Our ability to empathize with large numbers of other humans, many of whom we have met, many of whom speak different languages, practice different cultures, worship different gods, have skin that are different colors. People in our own community whose experience growing up might have been extremely different than yours, than mine. Leaving that space for them to have that experience and try to impart some of it on you, that's communication. Communicating the emotion so that you can engage in empathy. This is what has allowed humans to dominate the globe. No other animal can do this like we can. There are a few animals close to us that have relatively sophisticated communication. Crows, I learned, have up to 200 different calls, but they can't empathize and communicate globally and have a shared experience with a crow from another continent. They can't even conceive of this. Humans, on the other hand, we can. And it is exactly that, our ability to practice the skill of empathy and to communicate a broad spectrum of emotion and knowledge to other humans. That is exactly what has made us so successful. And if we get too far from that, that is what's going to be our undoing as well. Thanks for joining me on this road. I hope you got something out of that. I know I've been thinking a lot, and it really means a lot taking the time to listen to me talk through these things. Thank you, and goodbye.